Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, Navigating Financial Chaos, a Blueprint for Operational Excellence with Document Management. My name is John Jones. I am the Financial Services Product Marketing Manager at Ignite, and I'm excited to moderate today's webinar. Before we get into everything, a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions along the way, be sure to put those in the Q&A in the side panel area. That is the best way to get the most out of this webinar, and it makes our job of giving it more fun as well to be able to answer your questions. Additionally, if you have any audio or video challenges along the way, just refresh your browser and that will bring you right back in and should solve most of those challenges. If you do have any issues, put it in the Q&A and someone will be able to help you with that. To increase the engagement of today's webinar, we have two special offers. One, for a live attendee who stays to the end, a $250 Amazon gift card. For the official terms and conditions of that, you'll find that in the handout section of this the platform. And for the best question that comes through, there will be a $50 Amazon gift card for the person with the best question. With that, let's get into today's session. I'm joined today by Nick DeVore and Verity Larson. Nick, would you mind introducing yourself? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, John. Nick DeVore. I am the Wealth Management Practice Lead here at Ignite. Previously, prior to Ignite, I spent about 15 years in the wealth management industry. 10 of those years was I was an advisor where I also owned my own RIA, and prior to I came over to the tech side. So very well versed in terms of the business cases and the business workflows associated with that, now trying to apply that to the various wealth management firms that we serve.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. Verity.
Hi there, Verity Larson, founder, CEO of Verisoft Consulting. I've been in the industry for almost 25 years. Previously worked in the IT department at an RIA, so oversaw all the technology that was being used there. We now are an independent boutique consulting firm that helps firms with all of their technology and the integrations between those solutions, as well as just making sure that you are fully optimizing all of your technology and being as efficient as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much for those introductions. So today we're talking about document management and better process management for those documents. So as we look into digital modernization or digital transformation, for an overly used word, but as we look at the transformation that's happened over the centuries of the financial services industry into today, into this modern technology era, things have gone from physical, in-person documents, currency, etc., to digital, and that's digital paper, digital transactions, all of that. That adds a great way and ease of doing business across the industry, wealth management firms, banking, and all the like. But with that benefit also comes certain risks, certain additional challenges that come. When we look at how do we handle regulatory issues and the regulators in the industry, how do we deal with workflows and transferring through from start to finish those document workflows? What are the added security risks as we start to look and build these technology infrastructures, and then looking at cost and resource management? So Verity, starting with you, what are some of the main pain points that most financial services firms face when they look at a modern document management environment?
Well, I would say certainly you start with simply access, data access, document access, and kind of the controls around that access. So who has rights to, not just create, but modify, delete even, should documents even be able to be deleted? This just goes with data in general, and making sure that the right people have the right levels of access. But then it also gets into, change management and version control. So who, what are people able to do, and that then, how is that being tracked? And then from a compliance perspective, that they can actually be reported on. So even when it gets to any sort of audit requirements, that you're able to actually report out to audit agencies how you are maintaining data, how you're maintaining access, and maintaining those controls to prevent the wrong things happening or loss of data. And certainly there's a lot of concerns when it comes to even just cybersecurity in today's day and age, which we can certainly address later. But I do kind of want to call out that when it comes to access, this isn't just about internal access; it's also about external access, and making sure that things are protected accordingly. Of course, that's a big challenge, and not everybody is an expert at protecting that data. In-house IT a lot of times is not the right place or has the right expertise to be able to kind of build that infrastructure themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the amount of time and resources that it would take to build an internal cybersecurity team to accommodate all of these different systems, you look at outsourcing, and they're able to apply economies of scale with an entire cloud environment where you basically have to do the same things. As we like to say with cybersecurity, it's, the bad guys only have to be right once, but, the cyber teams and the IT teams have to be right all the time. So thank you for that.
Got it.
Nick, transitioning to you a little bit, with your experience in the industry and speaking to firms across the industry on a regular basis, what are you seeing as some of the pain points, and especially when you're dealing with legacy systems?
Yeah, definitely. And I also want to address that too, because I think there's such an importance around the cybersecurity aspect of it, they only have to be right one time. But when we have a lot of conversations with, customers and everybody else within that industry, they're sitting there saying, we're only a 20-person shop. Cyber criminals aren't coming after us within that. And that's a mindset that needs to change within that, solely because if something were to happen, you have that reputational damage, you have the trust within the clients, but also cybersecurity, these cyber criminals are not sitting, in a third world country saying, I'm going to go after this 20-person shop. They're going after the big boys, but they're also, doing a shotgun approach. They're doing whatever they can to get one of your employees to click and access something that they shouldn't, so it gets onto your computer. So, it goes back to training your employees that internal and external threats, what Verity said earlier, is, that's a big key to that. So, but going back to it, document management is such a huge part of the business, and especially in wealth management, everything has a document, from wealth financial plans to service work to onboarding, new clients, new employees, you name it. Everything that is involved with wealth management has PII. So it's of the utmost importance that it gets protected, that there's visibility into who's doing what with that information. But you sit there and think about it from an onboarding standpoint of, you're working with a customer, or the advisor is working with a customer, and they're meeting with them numerous times, going over financial plans, and they're saying, this is how we're going to provide service to you. And then the customer agrees that they're going to proceed forward. As they're opening that account document, that's the first real test of the service that's going to be delivered from the firm to the customer. If there's hiccups along the way, you're already starting out of the gate on the wrong foot. It has to go, I'm going to say, you have a little ground to make up to do so. So what I mean by that is, if there's NIGO, something not in good order, or if there is operational efficiencies on the back end of, hey, an associate forgot to include account paperwork with this, you got to go back to the client, because what that results in is delays of getting that account open, getting the assets over, getting revenue for the firm. And that's only one instance. If that's being multiplied over your firm numerous times, that's a lot of money that's being left on the table or out the door within those operational efficiencies within that. So being able to automate that is going to be key. We're going to touch on that a little more. But that's all I kind of really have for that. And I'll touch upon some customer experience with that. But I want to kick it back to you, John.
Yeah, absolutely. As we sit on the start of October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, one of the pillars of tenets of Cybersecurity Awareness Month is typically some sort of phishing identification. And as you started talking about, Nick, it's not necessarily the person's computer in a firm that they're trying to get access to. They're trying to get access to all that sensitive information that they can use, and then also then infiltrate the entire client base and sort of go into this scaled effect of getting there, which really causes a lot of havoc, especially in the financial lives of people. So
that could be something for a different topic too, John. We're in that because I do want to say cybersecurity, and we deal with this a lot, is especially with AI threats. You're going to have deep fakes coming out. There's a lot of threats that your employees are facing every day, and it only takes one mistake within.
Yes.
So,
yes, absolutely.
I do want to reiterate that, but back to you, John.
Yeah.
Well, so Nick, I want to actually add something here too. Sorry. So Nick, you had said something too about how you think everybody envisions that cybersecurity threats are really targeted more towards the big companies, right? They want to target Microsoft and Amazon and Google and whoever else. But that's not actually the case, and it is really down to that user level training and responsibility. There's actually a number of RAs that I've worked with where they have had data breaches, and it's actually been the result of a user clicking on a link from an email, and it's been ransomwared. So literally entire servers brought down their entire infrastructure and locked everybody out of their system, and they've lost access to literally everything. And I mean, that is extremely impactful to the business, right? And just to recover from that, fortunately, those that I've experienced that have had this happen have been able to to rebuild and certainly been very fortunate they didn't even lose any clients from it. But still, it's also your responsibility, to then notify your clients that this data breach happened, and how you're addressing it. And there is a potential that you can lose customers, lose clients from that. So like, this isn't just about losing access to data or anything like that. Like there's, a domino effect here that could literally shut down your business, or even cause any greater, let's say even legal challenges.
Yeah, yes, 100%. And Verity, to your point of access control, and I know this goes back to document management too in cybersecurity, is I can pinpoint a specific time where we had a customer in the area, didn't have proper access controls in place. He had a disgruntled employee stay late on Friday, deleted everything from their server, purged it all. So when the owner came in on Monday, there was nothing there. Luckily, we were able to help recover everything, but it goes back to the importance of knowing who's accessing what information and what are they doing with it. But
yeah, and not all of those things are possible or far more complex in a legacy system. So I think we've done a great job of talking about the compliance and regulatory challenges, workflow challenges of disjointed systems, the data security risks that come from all of this. Let's transition into, from those pain points, what can we do to solve those? So Verity, can you start by talking about, how can some of these pain points be addressed?
Certainly. So, I guess what I'd say is really start by identifying what those pain points are. And this is something that, people can do internally in their own organizations. So this is about identifying, kind of talking to throughout the company, throughout all of your staff, and trying to identify what are their challenges, where are we, maybe even having to do like duplicate entry of information, where are things disjointed, and you certainly do that yourself. Then on top of it, I'd say then next is look at the integration of those systems, right? So you want to make sure that you're sharing information appropriately and trying to reduce, the duplicate entry or the information in multiple places. You want to have that better structured. But it's also about policies and procedures, making sure that you have things well documented and that and that people are doing things consistently across your entire organization. When people are doing things, very disjointed and differently, that also makes, adds to the challenge of structure and an organization. So just having policies and procedures in place. And then, of course, it's also about hiring the right resources. You have to have the right resources in place, and that can mean getting help externally as well. Maybe it's hiring external consulting services, or it's hiring additional IT vendors, whatever it is, but hire the right people for the job that have the right level of expertise to help you through all of this. And then of course we could talk about, costs, and it's a lot easier and less expensive to fix things and build the right infrastructure up front than to be paying down the road when something goes wrong. So it's about investing in the tools and technology up front is way more cost effective. And honestly, you do those things right, and kind of all of these things right, putting in policies and procedures, making sure you're identifying, where the gaps are and trying to make those improvements. All of that is then also a time saver for your staff, which then offsets, how much time they are able to spend on other things like servicing your clients. It's just a domino effect.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about costs, and when you look at trade-offs and shared responsibility, so firms know their operations best. They know how they work, who should have access, who shouldn't have access, what they want to report on. They know, and IT firms are familiar with all of, security requirements and things like that, but split and share that responsibility. Push off the security infrastructure management to an organization that can do that. And you assume the responsibility of, setting up those policies and procedures. Those are great points. Nick, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, no, policies and procedures are a key to it. So, it goes back to, within that training and process within that. So from the advisor perspective and dealing with the customers, there has to be processes in place of, we have templates in order. If it's this kind of account or it's something associated with onboarding this type of customer, they can immediately access a certain template. And it goes back to training and knowing how to access that kind of information. And also ensuring that there's workflows enabled. So you have the front end of the advisors or the associates with the customers, but also making sure that gets kicked off in the back end. So there's notifications automatically happening that, a document's been created or signed from an e-signature that the operations knows from it. If there's something wrong, then immediately it kicks off to another workflow. So finding ways to automate these workflows is key. It helps alleviate IT tickets. It helps alleviate other congestions and bottlenecks. But ultimately, the process and everything comes back to the customer experience. Wealth management firms are a commodity these days. If there's unhappiness amongst one advisor, you can go to a different advisor, you go right down the street. It's just like any other business services that are out there. But what differentiates a firm or an RIA, wealth management, however you want to do it, is going to be that customer experience. And there's more of an expectation on it now than ever, given technology is happening, and you starting to see a shift towards the younger generation. And how do we get these younger generations on there? They're more technology. I can never say that word. Tech savvy, and it's that instant gratification as to, hey, if we're going to do this, I have to go through all this paperwork to get something set up. But like, I'm not jumping through all these various hoops to set up. It's a terrible customer experience, but you have to find ways to automate that, especially the onboarding process, the servicing, you name it, any kind of interactions with that. As long as you can automate it, free up more time for the advisors, the staffs to go drive more revenue. Ultimately it helps decrease that cost. But it's you have to look at a document management system as a bit of an investment for operational efficiency that also will, should lead to substantial ROI down the road.
Yes, yes. So when we look at the great wealth transfer, the trillions of dollars that are getting transferred from, the boomer generation to the, younger, more technologically savvy generation, those individuals expect easy, seamless systems. So when you ask me for the following 60 documents, I want an easy way to submit those, ensure that I've done the right things. From that internal process, staff, is also transitioning from more tech-savvy users, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Verity, we'll have you talk about some of the benefits that come from implementing a modern system. But the more times that you have to change between one system to another, is the more chance for attack surface risk, the more chance for bottlenecks or something gets lost in that process. So Verity, jumping back into you, looking at some of the key benefits that come from a fully integrated modern document management solution. Could you talk to us about, and our webinar listeners here, about some of those great benefits that come?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is about, that integration, right? And the collaboration and the sharing of that data, that can be that huge time saver. So to me, it's, I guess to kind of walk through an example, I think about just the like new account opening process, what that even looked like, and think about that process. It starts with a say you have a prospect in your CRM. Well, that prospect needs to be transitioned into a client, and then once you get that client established, what do you need to do? Of course, there's account paperwork or transfer paperwork that needs to be filled out with the custodian. There's probably information at the custodian that then should be pre-populating other forms. Maybe that information comes from your CRM, maybe it comes from the custodian, but you want a single source, for every piece of information. But then in your documents, you're also talking about the population of those documents, getting signatures on those documents, and making all of that such a seamless process. Is really about that client experience, because, and it's also time. Like, why do you want to be spending weeks to open a single account? This should take a matter of a day, two. I mean, the delay might be by getting the client's signature and maybe they're out of town or something. But if you can make it easy where they can literally pull it up on their phone and, do an e-signature, there should be no reason for delays. So anyway, it's, I think, the more integration, the more consolidation of these processes that you can do certainly will simplify, the overall process. I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead, Gary.
I was just going to add, I think that, some of the other considerations, when we've done this type of work, a lot of times what we're seeing is when we're doing this type of optimization, you're ultimately saving a user anywhere from, maybe an hour or two a day, which of course compounded over a week, you're looking at, 5 to 10 hours a week. And if you have multiple people in your company doing those processes, just think about, how that time compounds, and the amount of time you can be saving to spend it on customer service, client service, or sales, additional growth of your business, because this is also about being not just efficient with your time, but to what Nick said earlier, it's also about growth of your company. You need to be able to grow without requiring to, double in headcount, and technology can help you do that. And it's just about making sure you're using it correctly.
Yes. Yeah. The ability to take the mundane tasks and let technology do that. One of my favorite stats about knowledge workers is that in legacy outdated systems, 60% of a knowledge worker's day is spent just figuring out what I need to do. And only 40% of that is actually spent in doing the value added tasks. And by implementing these kinds of systems, we're able to not only add additional capacity, as you mentioned, but, staff frustrations, staff actually, if they can't easily do their job, and are constantly having to solve for problems that shouldn't exist, they'll leave and go somewhere else. So these systems not only add firm capacity, but they add in employee satisfaction. You're not going to recoup 100% of that. There's no such thing as 100% efficiency. But that has the ability to give back more capacity to the firm, more time for staff to, take a breather, and spend more time on those client experience, high value touches. All fantastic.
John, it's interesting. I have clients that have actually lost employees because of that frustration of lack of technology and just the manual effort that their job entails. And they know that there are better ways to do it. They may not know how to better do it. They just know that there has to be a better way. And they just get frustrated with the manual work that is their job. And I have had clients at these RAs that have lost operational and client service staff because of how manual their work is.
And I would also, and I was going to say too, Verity, a big thing too that we're seeing is the involvement of PE firms and outside investors coming into that. So it comes back to business goals of the firm as well. Is that the road that you're going down for growth? Because these kinds of investors, they value tech stacks. If there aren't things in place that show that you have appropriate document management to onboard, to whatever their services are, or you're not growing in efficient ways, like that devalues the firm. So it comes back to overall business goals for the firm as well.
Yeah, exactly. When you're looking at selling a firm, retiring, if you don't have someone to turn it over to, selling it to somewhere else is the next best option. And if you don't have well-documented processes and systems that they can easily then adopt, that reduces the overall value and sale price of your firm. So you both started talking about, and Verity, the knowledge worker who, hey, I know things need to get solved, but at my level, I can't solve this. So we've talked about the problems with these outdated, disconnected systems. We've talked about some of the benefits that can come from them. But one of the biggest challenges is, what do I do? What steps do I take? How can financial services organizations start implementing and optimizing workflows for collaboration, security, and better compliance and efficiency? What are some of those first steps? And Verity, we'll start with you.
Certainly. Well, I would say, certainly it is about evaluating and identifying, where your challenges are, and document those. So do a needs assessment. Figure out where your bottlenecks are, what your challenges are, write it down, document it, figure out what your issues are and where people are frustrated. Write them down, document it. And then, of course, get help from experts. The thing is in a lot of cases, and this goes to a lot of clients I talk with, like, they don't know what they don't know. They're so kind of, single-mindedly focused on, well, this is my business and this is how I've always done it. So a lot of times you don't even know what's possible. And it's just You just don't know until you ask and you find help and you get experts in that actually know. So get some advice, get guidance. And also make sure that you're including your clients and their feedback into this process. You also need to make sure that any asks that they are making are accommodated for. So it's not just listening to employees and their requests or concerns. It's also about your clients and what they're asking for. And just because you have one client that may be very vocal and asking for it doesn't mean that the other 50 clients that you have are not asking for those things, right? So a lot of people are afraid to ask, and they, if anything, they're just going to leave and go find somebody else that does it and not think, oh, well, maybe I should ask my advisor if they can give me something besides what they're currently doing or make improvements, right? They're just going to go find somebody else to do it. So make sure you bring in client feedback into the process. And then I'd also say, think about employee training. So when it comes to training employees, this has to be constant and ongoing. When you typically onboard a new employee, it tends to start, I feel like, with where you have somebody sit down and shadow you for, say, a week, and then you just kind of send them off and say, all right, go and do your job, and then there's no follow-up to check to see how are they now going and executing on what you quote unquote train them to do, and sometimes you don't even have documented processes, that are instructing them exactly how to do things properly. But training employees is critical, and you should be coming back to training or at least doing kind of reviews with employees ongoing, whether it's every 6 months or every year, because I think it's an adage that you use, John, when we were talking about this subject. It's like the telephone game, right?
Yes.
You say something to one person and then they pass it on to another person. It gets passed on to another person. And by the time you end the game, that message has completely been distorted and it's not at all what was initially stated at the beginning. And so that's also how we tend to find that throughout organizations, even when a team has been trained together, you break them up and you now go and start asking people individually, what did you learn or how would you do this? Everybody provides different instructions. And so, that's a big challenge, but it is something that can be overcome with proper training.
Yes. Single sources of truth go for both data, but it also goes for documentation. That yellow school bus can turn into a green tomato pretty fast from a process perspective. We started with the following 27 steps, and then somebody forgot 3 of them, and now we've got something that looks nothing like what that original process looked like. 2 other things that I really wanted to touch on. You mentioned bringing in experts. One of the things that financial services firms talk about is, the fact that while anyone can go open a Fidelity account today and do their own money management, they're not experts in that. They don't do it day in and day out. So while they might be able to do it, there are shortfalls, there are, tricks of the trade, experiential things that come from doing this day in and day out. And that certainly applies to, transitioning into one of the, into a modern technology stack, finding a Sherpa, if you will, who does this and guides people through this process all the time, knows the right questions to ask. In fact, we have a question that did come in that I want to address here related to that, which is, as you're starting to embark on this process, Verity, who should get brought in an organization when you start looking at documenting processes and modernizing or migrating technology stacks?
The answer simply is everybody. Honestly, that is the best way. It should be everybody in the firm, or at least representation from every role within your organization. You need to get input. This is not a decision that should be made by just one department. It should not be made just by IT or just by the operations team or just by, the owners of the business. This needs to be everybody across the organization represented. And honestly, it also makes, when you involve everybody from all departments, it also makes it easier for user adoption. When things get rolled out and there is change that's going to happen across the company, as long as everybody is aware, hey, my voice was heard, even if you didn't actually do what I wanted it to be done, maybe I gave my opinion, I really don't want something, but, the decision was made, at least my voice was heard. And it makes change that much more accepting to people, which is critical.
100%. And Verity, I do want to say that is so important in today, is involving everybody. It's all too often when we onboard a new customer, it is IT saying, okay, how do we set up our folder structure? What does it look like? What are some other firms that are doing? And to me, it's not about what other firms are doing. It is about what your users are comfortable doing. And that is compliance, operations, it's the advisors, it's the IT, everybody involved, and kind of take the collected effort to do that. So I'm speaking specifically to Ignite, but I think that involves all aspects of it. So I think you were on point with that one, Verity.
Yes, bringing in everyone so that you can have better change management. When more people have a stake in a process, it's more likely to go smoothly, and it's also more likely to be effective. If you only talk to one group and you find out that, hey, this other group has this random system that they've been using, that if we just talk to them, we could have reduced that silo and integrated into the whole technology stack. All great points, Verity. Nick, could you talk to some of the compliance considerations throughout this process? What are some of the things, especially when looking at needs analysis, when you're looking at who to involve and the questions to ask? Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so we go to quite a few compliance events across the U.S. and have a lot of conversations with compliance officers. And one of the most interesting questions that always gets asked at no matter what conference is, who owns the IT stack? Who owns document management and cybersecurity? And it's always about 50% of compliance or IT. And to me, that needs to be a little better than 50-50. Some of the best practices to what we see in terms of customers, and sadly, it's not as many, but it's compliance and IT know their ownerships, are in constant communications with it. I've talked to customers where compliance has no idea, they don't have access to certain things, and it's just like, but they need that visibility because of all the policies and procedures from a regulatory standpoint that have to be taken into effect. But they need that visibility as to where does the information lie, who has access to it, what are they doing with that information, and where does it all reside? Is it across multiple repositories? How can you quickly do that if the audit comes in, if the SEC or FINRA, whomever you have as a regulatory environment comes in and does that audit? Y'all are scrambling around trying to showcase that you have things in place. Our firms who have that buttoned up and a lot of communications within the compliance and the IT departments, they sit there and are able to demonstrate to these auditors, hey, here, we have the visibility into who's accessing what. We can pull up, John, this is everything that John has access to. So it makes that audit process a lot easier when that happens, because there's a little more confidence within that regulatory body that this firm has everything under control. Going back to it from a regulatory standpoint, the hot topic is AI. The SEC is sitting there talking about how they want to govern the AI, and that should be used as a base floor at a bare minimum, but we should be trying to achieve a little more within that. But the use of AI, it helps identify information a lot quicker within that. Where does stuff happen? I can't tell you, and that goes back to what John was saying. Within workflows, a lot of people waste time trying to find information or do mundane tasks. use technology within that. And there are compliant reasons to use AI. Just see where the SEC, where some of these regulatory bodies are sitting from, and they're already transparent with what they're doing. Business continuity is another big case. So I'm in North Carolina. We're dealing with the hurricane right now. If the power goes out and a customer calls, you have to have something in place regarding that. We got to have access. If there's a service work, you can't be, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have internet access. You have to be able to process something. So like the business continuity is incredible. RAD policies is another great one. So that's retention, archival, deletion, ensuring that you have the ability to mitigate risk. If there is a file that is there for longer than 8 years or beyond, I want to say retention periods, why are we holding on to that file? We can archive that information and put that away, because anything else is a liability outside of that. And it also goes back to cybersecurity. Everything kind of comes back to knowing who's accessing what, but also having eyes on, hey, why is John accessing, from, California and also Europe at the same time? Something doesn't add up here. And to be able to have access controls and sit there and knock a user out if something doesn't seem to be right, it goes back to a regulatory standpoint. Everything goes back to that cybersecurity, and it's becoming more and more focused. So we have, I think, if I do my math right, about 17 more months for breach reporting. If something ever happens in material within that firm, you have to be able to report upon it. Firms need to start implementing that stuff in place, because it's going to be here before you know it, that you have to demonstrate that you have these kind of tech stack in place to be able to report if a breach were ever to occur. But you also have to be able to detect if that was ever to occur as well.
Yes. You bring up a lot of great points that tie right into what Verity was talking about. So when you talk about, tech stack silos, legacy on-prem servers can do a lot of this stuff. But not to the same degree. Usually not natively. You have to have separate add-ons of tools that add cost and additional management, additional team and staff time that's required. All of that bringing into one system to allow you to do that. And you mentioned the hurricane. Before I came into this world that is software, spent 7.5 years working in marketing and technology for a broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, and insurance wholesaler. And before cloud became a big thing, or before we adopted it, we actually had a separate office lease with servers and all of that we never went to, but that we could go to in the case that the office flooded, burned down, or something like that in business continuity. And that was just money that went down the drain, not needing to be spent, that was able to then be invested in other areas. So all great things. And that brings us to the next part of this, which is that, Verity, as part of what Verisoft does, you do this every day. Your IT background and founding Verisoft is to really help the wealth management firms and others, family offices and the like, to make this transition. Can you talk about some of the value that you're able to provide and the outside perspective to an organization in navigating this transition?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just said it, right? It's an outside perspective. I mentioned earlier where, a number of employees and certainly even advisors, right? This is your world, and you, in many cases, have worked at the same company for many, many years, sometimes decades. And it becomes, that this is just the only way that you've ever known to do things. And so being able to think outside the box can be very difficult. You don't even really know a lot of what is possible. And so Verisoft, of course, we have worked with hundreds of clients and, thousands of users at this point, and seen so many different ways of doing things, so many different technology platforms. And of course, we're talking about everything from portfolio accounting and management, reporting, client portals, document management systems, to trading, rebalancing, CRM, risk analytics. I mean, the list just goes on and on, all of the tools. And of course, everybody's seen the expansion of technology in this space. And it just seems like every day there's, a new provider out there that has a new solution or a new way of doing things. And that is what we do full time. It is our job to keep up on all of this latest, greatest technology, to know what's out there, what all the options are. That's all we do, right? So to be able to come into a firm and do our assessment and then give recommendations for improvements, for ways to streamline, to automate, to simplify the way that you're doing things. But I would say it's not even about simplifying, it's about more accurately as well, right? This is about accuracy, consistency, things like that as well. So doing that assessment and then giving recommendations is, what we do on a regular basis. I would add, though, that, I think something that does tend to set us apart from other consulting firms is we also then take it to the next step, which is implementation. We actually want to help you execute on those plans. We're not just going to hand over and say, well, here's a bunch of ways that you can make improvements, and then goodbye, good luck. We want to actually help you make that a reality. And so whether that goes further into additional vendor selection and then implementation, as well as building integration, building custom reporting, building solutions, migrating your data from one system to another, all of that effort. And that's something we do every day. So of course have tons and tons of knowledge and experience into a myriad of ways of doing things. And everything is all about customizing to each business's needs, because everybody is different. Even though you are providing the same solutions, the same advice, and same, tends to be similar customer service experience, right? Everybody wants to provide high value, high touch client service. You might do it a little differently. So every recommendation we make is unique with you in mind and your specific needs.
You bring up a great point, and where I was kind of going to jump in there, because when I was on, the other side of this webinar, working in the back office, I can't tell you how many weeks of time got spent in doing use case analysis and then going out to the marketplace and trying to figure out which system was best, which, does this have the features that I need? Is it the most optimized value? Because as you mentioned, it's not a one size fits all. And when you talk about, the cost of these infrastructures, they can be cheap or they can be expensive. But what really matters is optimizing that value. Does the solution align with all of the use case needs that the firm has identified? And that's the best option. So for a small firm, for a large firm, picking that right technology stack and to have that guide along the way of the expert consultant to be able to say, hey, you've identified these things. We've got exactly, someone in mind for you, which is part of how we, built the relationship between Ignite and Versoft. It is very much in that as a potential solution for some of your customers and clients. And that brings up one thing that I did want to mention before I pass it over to Nick to talk about the value that Ignite brings into this. But if you are looking for more information, in the resources section, along with the raffle prize terms and conditions, are also two informational data sheets, one from Versoft on the solutions and services that they provide and some of the value that comes and how you can take the next step, and as well as from Ignite. So thank you so very much for that, Verity. And Nick, over to you in terms of some of the value differentiators that Ignite brings to this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to start off, I don't think I mentioned it in the beginning, but Ignite has over 2,000 financial services customers. In what the beauty of it is too, is Ignite only hires industries or individuals who have specific industry experience. So what that allows us to do, in addition to having daily communication and daily feedback with our customers as to how we can help design and customize that our platform specifically to the unique challenges that they're facing in managing the documents and ensuring both operational efficiency and that the solutions also meeting regulatory compliance. We take that into such good consideration because, again, I can't tell you how many customers sit there and bring us ideas and sit there and say, hey, it's on the roadmap in two quarters, and it's so cool. But to kind of sum it up and wrap it in a bow, everything that we've essentially talked about in this webinar is how Ignite provides solutions based on our platform. So we're allowing firms to enhance their compliance and regulatory adherence. We're streamlining workflows and how you want to define that workflow, from customer onboarding, employee onboarding, to servicing, to loan documents, you name it. We're strengthening data security. We're reducing costs and optimizing resource management. I do want to make the shameless plug. 2 weeks ago, we announced a customized solution. We're calling it our document portal. And what the document portal is, it simplifies and secures document requests and collection workflows. And the purpose of it is to elevate that client and staff user experience, because we talked about that. That's a differentiator amongst other RIAs in this space, is how do you elevate that client experience? So we collected all this feedback all throughout the year, had our project engineers work on it relentlessly, and we're spitting this product out, and to much fanfare. So I'm excited about where it's coming, and we're kind of focusing on automating those workflows even more and more. But that data security. So I think you heard us say quite a few. The visibility, knowing who's accessing what are they doing with it. If a cyber event were to ever happen, I go back to the example that I used earlier in that customer where the employee purged all the data and came back. We were able to help restore that. He had a very tough go of it that Monday, but we're able to restore all those files. So those are all various services to ensure that business continuity happened, but those are all things that Ignite really excels in. And ultimately what that is doing is we're trying to give more time back to, IT, more time back to compliance, more time back to the business users to accelerate that growth and take the firm to the next level.
Thank you, Nick. We do have a question that came in. In Verity, this makes most sense for you. When you're looking at, implementing new systems, one of the things that sometimes happens is somebody has an old tool that they really like, or they really prefer this other way. So what are some ways that you've seen to be able to encourage user adoption and engagement with new tools and systems?
Yeah. So I'd say besides making sure that those users are involved in that evaluation and selection of new technology, making sure they're included and they're able to contribute in, kind of that needs assessment, identifying what their functional requirements are. I think the next piece is you need to show them and explain to them how the new tool adds additional value. So what are the benefits? What are they getting out of it? And sometimes it's not even just for them. It's also explaining how that new tool is more valuable to the overall organization or to ownership, to management, whatever it is. Because I think, so often people are like, well, this is my job. I just want to do my job the same way. But there are value adds for the business, and they just need to be aware that, well, hey, using this new tool will mean that, from a compliance perspective or from a management perspective, they are now able to get better business intelligence, to make better business decisions, whatever. It becomes, it's more about how the business can be better and more efficient collectively rather than you as an individual. And I know that sometimes that still can be hard for people to accept because people tend to be selfish. They just want to worry about themselves. But, a lot of times, building on your technology and change and doing change and implementing new technology is for the better of the business. It is for the better of the clients and that client experience. And it's also, it should be better for each user as well, each, employee. So it's really about explaining why there's a change and what the value add for that change is going to be.
Yes, yes, yeah. In old legacy systems that are hard to use, that tends to provide workarounds of, well, this is difficult, so I'm going to find my own way of doing it. But if you make a system easy to use, a process easy to follow, it's more likely to be that your staff is going to use it and they'll appreciate it, appreciate you for making it easier for them along the way. Great points. Nick, one of the other questions that came in is, there are a lot of document management solutions out there on the marketplace. What are some of the things that differentiate Ignite within the space?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind in the feedback that we get a lot from our customers is what we call our map drive experience. What that means is we're one of the only firms that are available or out there as a solution that replicate the File Explorer experience into the cloud. I've heard it called from customers as being a stealth solution. And what that means is they don't realize that they're using us. So we sit there and we have conversations with them and they're like, what's Ignite? We don't use Ignite. And then we sit there and say, hey, the H drive, the Z drive, Y drive, whatever you see on your File Explorer, that's Ignite. And then it's just like, oh, that makes so much sense. So there's not a whole lot of training that happens with those users because everybody is familiar with how a file structure works. And we're able to replicate that. And there's a bunch of little nuances depending on how the firm operates that really are differentiators from us amongst others. But again, one of the other things that I really pride myself on as a firm, and I've touched upon it previously, is we listen to the customer. Customer says, we need to do this for the business. We take it to our product team and see how we can adapt that. So we're really trying to drive as much value specific to the unique needs of the wealth management business.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. And that really talks into some of the things that Verity spoke to relative to if you make the system easy to use, that the training, the change management becomes easier. Well, that is the end of our questions, the end of our webinar. The gift card winners for the webinar will be announced after. Nick, wanted to thank you for joining us today from Ignite. Verity, thank you so very much for joining us and your partnership, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much for taking the time out.